Hey, wonderful people. I've just been away, recharging my batteries, energising myself with the crisp sea air here in Scotland. Before I launch into this week's monologue, here's a bit of housekeeping. I had a lot of messages from people saying they're not getting reminders from YouTube that I've got a new video out. Not sure what's going on there. Let's conspire. Anyway, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and check out my website as well. And if you want to, you can show real concrete support, which helps keep the channel going. The way you do that is to sign up to my patreon.com site. Go to patreon.com, find me by name, part with some cash and join us. Okay, fortified with vitamin D from the sun over this fair isle, and with the cobwebs well and truly blown away, it's time to grapple with the latest attack being made on right-minded folk like thee and me.
Morning, Neil. Good to have you back. What have you been thinking about this week?
I almost admire the audacity of the Trump administration's recent insistence that the thing we were taught to call COVID-19 leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. I say almost admire because I'm mostly appalled. I almost admire the audacity of making it a done deal. But what they called the SARS-CoV-2 virus was a real thing, something that was real, conjured into being by scientists paid partly by the United States of America to develop what they call gain of function, which is the Bond villain dream of making something more deadly than nature intended. I say it's audacious because at no point does the fabled lab leak theory allow for the possibility that there was no new disease at all. Now, I'm deliberately provocative when I say that. I know what I'm doing, and I know that's a contentious thing to say, but I think it's an important idea to contemplate in the context of what is being done here. Enough serious-minded people have also questioned the existence of SARS-CoV-2, and they're still questioning it. Credentialed people, me, serious, trained, scientifically minded people have questions they want answered. So in that context, it ought to remain a possibility, rather than us just being handed another fait accompli from on high. But no, apparently the jury is back in and the judgment has come down on one of the only two explanations that were ever publicly countenanced by the authorities that used the thing they taught us to call COVID-19 to change the world and our lives forever. The choices in question have always and only ever been A, the disease happened spontaneously and naturally when a pangolin and a bat somehow traded something nasty, or B, something was cooked up in a lab and then leaked by accident or on purpose. That's it. Those were the only options that we were invited to contemplate from officialdom. Never allowed official space was option C, which is that there was no new disease, no such thing as SARS-CoV-2, that gain of function is still a dream rather than a reality. It's one of those things they talk about doing, but the jury's still out on whether they can actually do it or not. And even if there was something new, which is of course a possibility, there was no pandemic. There was a pandemic of lies. Lies about the need for face masks, the need to wear a face mask when walking around a restaurant but not when seated. You know, the need for one-way systems in shops, for shutting beaches and playgrounds, for social distancing, the rule of 6, the rule of 9. As the meme said, imagine a disease so deadly you only know you've got it if you take a test. Imagine a vaccine so safe and effective they have to force you to take it. And of course, the reason no space has been allowed for possibility C, the possibility there was no such thing as COVID-19, well, because frankly, it's too awful to contemplate. It would force us to contemplate that humanity was hoaxed on a global scale, much like the climate hoax that's still out there. If there was no new disease, no COVID-19, If there was a pandemic, but only a pandemic of testing, using tests that never could and never did detect the thing they taught us to call COVID-19. If the hoax was used to lock us down, to facilitate the greatest transfer of cash from us to them, from poor to rich in human history. If the hoax was used to frighten billions of people into taking an experimental gene therapy that was never demonstrably safe or effective, but that certainly ended or wrecked millions of lives, and is still doing so. Of course, for most people, contemplating those possibilities is too dark, too much, and so they won't and don't. I was among the duped for a while. I keep saying this because, continually confronted online by people finding out I used to think differently. When I've said all along I used to think differently. It's no surprise. I got stuff wrong. I welcomed the first couple of weeks of lockdown because back in the old days, I trusted the authorities and the experts when they said a deadly disease was out there. I never personally wanted the new jabs, but it never crossed my mind, well, not at first, that the government would knowingly roll out something lethally dangerous and then use every coercive trick in the book to have as many people as possible submit to the needle over and over. But then my own journey of discovery began, largely listening to and talking with all sorts of credentialed, serious people who were saying all sorts of things that at first sounded frankly outlandish to me. But time passed. I read more, I kept listening, until by now, almost as an intellectual exercise, a thought experiment, I make myself make space for that most appalling of possibilities, that there was no new disease, that the dead were almost exclusively the elderly, with multiple illnesses and frailties, and who in large part died not because of a disease of any sort, but on account of the way they were treated. I realised the figures of the so-called COVID dead were whipped up by the barefaced tactic of counting anyone who died within 28 days of a positive result from one of the inappropriately applied tests was counted as a COVID death, even if they actually died of cancer or a road traffic accident. I invite you, as part of the thought experiment, let's say, to track down and read some of the literature on the subject of viruses. And before anybody jumps in and says, virus denier, which I'm not, because I don't know enough about it, but I invite you to read about it, including the hotly debated topic of whether viruses, such entities, are some or other endogenous phenomenon, which is to say, having their origin inside the body, and whether or not they're ever in the air or passed between humans. Now, I'm not coming down on judgment on that, but it gives you a sense of the complexity of what's going on here. Read too about exactly what the experts mean when they say they identified and isolated the thing they call SARS-CoV-2. Let's just say there are experts who say they've done all that they can show you it, they can show you the sequence of amino acids, and they can show you it. But there are other experts who say they certainly have not done that. It's not been isolated in that way. Again, I don't know. Settled science, in this as in many contentious topics, is for the birds. Okay, but now, as convenient as you like, comes the statement from Team Trump in the middle of a bitter trade war with China that SARS-CoV-2 leaked from a lab in China. Apart from heaping pressure on China on a new front, the utterly galling fact of the matter is that this top-level declaration that a deadly disease existed, was man-made and leaked from a Chinese lab, is the get-out-of-jail-free card the guilty have kept up their sleeves until what is deemed the perfect moment to lay it on the table. If they can sell unchallenged the notion that a deadly disease cooked up and leaked by a foreign power was real, then they can stand behind their podiums and say, well, in the face of a real and present danger, we had to do something to save all of you. We had to keep you in your homes. We had to roll out whatever magic bullets we'd been able to whip up in the time available. We may have got some things wrong, but we had to try, and after all, we were only doing our best. And if enough people nod along with that, then the billions remain transferred into the bank accounts of the few. Those dead or chronically damaged by the jabs are placed further yet from any justice. The mRNA platform stays out there, earning yet more billions for the few in control of it. And worst of all, the door will have been jammed open to enable the same people to do exactly the same thing again anytime they have the need or just the urge to do so. It's the sheer potency, the efficacy, the problem-solving, guilt-dissolving power of the lab leak story that must surely have us challenge it head on. Ask yourself this. If you had done what the guilty have done, and there was a copper-bottomed, 24-karat gold justification you could offer to get yourself off the hook, if you knew what they knew, those that partied behind closed doors at the height of the fear they had concocted precisely because they knew all along there was nothing to fear, because there was nothing out there, no COVID-19. If you were party to the greatest crime ever inflicted against humanity, if you knew all that death, all that harm, was committed only in the name of gain of wealth and gain of power, if you saw a way to get away with it, and not just get away with it, but tee up the next one, what would you do?